What do you know about Britain?
Well, British people complain all the time. The weather is cold and wet and the food is unhealthy. Also, they always drink tea instead of water. Plus, British people are loud and obnoxious when they're drunk.
Oh. One thing I've noticed about high-level IELTS students is that they tend to avoid generalized statements in their writing and speaking. They use a technique called hedging. Here's how to do it. Add introductory phrases to make statements sound less certain. Instead of saying, British people complain all the time, we can say, it is often assumed that British people complain all the time. Use hedging verbs like tend to, seem to, and appear to. Instead of saying, the weather is cold and wet, we can say, the weather tends to be cold and wet. Use modal verbs like can, could, may, or might. Instead of the food is unhealthy, we can say the food can be unhealthy. When we want to hedge our statements, we should avoid using adverbs like always and never. Instead, we use other adverbs like generally, usually, often, occasionally, hardly ever, and rarely. So instead of saying they always drink tea instead of water, we can say they often drink tea instead of water. Another useful way to hedge our language is to use quantifiers like the majority of or many of. So instead of saying British people are loud and obnoxious when they're drunk, we can hedge this by saying many of the British people I know are loud and obnoxious when they're drunk. Let's try that again.
Well, it's often assumed that British people complain all the time. The weather tends to be cold and wet and the food can be unhealthy. Also, they often drink tea instead of water. Plus, many of the British people I know are loud and obnoxious when they're drunk.
Cheers.